Okay, Lars, are you ready to do this?
I'm
Are we
ready.
ready to
Let's
record our
go. Let's
first
have
episode?
fun. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Circle Back Club. I'm your host, Aparna and a public school teacher turned entrepreneur 3 times over. I really love connecting the dots between data, systems, and stories, and I am obsessed with how we build a better future of work intentionally. Because the place that most of us spend most of our days should not feel like a punishment. And before we go any further, let me introduce you to my co host, Lars, my friend, my colleague. Thank you for being on this journey with me.
I'm so grateful to do this with you, Aparna. And it's been amazing to see the way that you honestly really are obsessed with the future of work and have done it your entire career. And now we get to do this together. Hey everyone, my name's Lars. I'm a leadership development facilitator and a somatic coach with a career working with corporations, really navigating interpersonal and cross-cultural complexity. I specialize in sitting with people in the really gray, scary spaces. And as a human, I feel more than I know. I care about helping corporate workers listen to their bodies, which we will talk about today. And I am a golden retriever who will chase any ball that you throw at me. So, whenever you want, I'm ready.
So I feel like having a podcast these days is what it was like having a newsletter 5 years ago. Like everybody seems to have one. And so why should people tune into ours?
Yeah, that's a good question. What matters to us?
So I feel like, you and I have been talking for a couple of years about creating the
Yeah.
space, right? And really about creating a space that we have needed and wanted as we have gone from entry level and frontline work to being in mid career leadership roles and now to entrepreneurship. And I think, you and I talk about this, and I know that we talk about this with other people as well, that most of us came into our jobs with an implicit contract that if we work hard and we create value for our organizations, we get certain rewards, right? Like at a minimum, we're getting a steady paycheck, we're getting some good health care, we're getting benefits, we get to grow our 401ks. And I'm just wondering, is that happening for people? Is that still happening for people? And I think that what's become obvious in the last couple of years is that that contract isn't getting played out. And that's not a personal moral feeling, right? The system that has convinced all of us, it's convinced, you and I as well, that our worth
Yeah.
lives in our productivity, our title, our ability to keep pushing through exhaustion while maintaining a positive attitude. That system is really broken. And in order to create something new, you and I feel like we need to process what has been and what is. And I think so many of us in this moment of social and political turmoil are waking up to the fact that our office jobs are just as precarious, just as exploitative, but also just as worthy of collective action as any other group. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like what are we going to do here with this podcast and in this time and space together? Hopefully, we're going to start with tracing the origins of white collar work. And I know that you've been doing a lot of research on these deliberate shifts that have happened post World War II, away from producing things that people need towards forcing consumption of things that nobody wants. I discovered this brand called Yacht Water, which is canned water.
No, not
Couple of
yacht
years,
water.
yacht, it's called Yacht Water. I don't need yacht water. Um, we're gonna explore what see, you can't even, like you can't with yacht water.
I can't,
Um, we're also
but they need you.
the yacht water people need me.
Yacht water needs you. Yes.
Oh, we're also going to explore what your body knows that your mind hasn't caught up to yet. The teeth grinding, the Sunday scaries, the what you feel in your tummy when you see your boss's name on Slack or Teams at 9 o'clock at night. We're going to dig into the cost of being the perfect employee, the harm that we have normalized, the things we ignore to climb the ladder and secure our own bag, and why even the concept of being a great worker is just one big lie. We're going to expose why self advocacy is smoke and mirrors when there's a corporate hand pressing down on the scales of justice, right? And the personal branding and manifestation coaching, chief and networking organizations that are telling you that you can have a seat at the table. Let's actually talk about what they're selling because a seat at the table ain't it. We're
Mm,
also going to name the scarcity and fear underneath all of this, the terror of losing our status, the voice that tells us, hey, like, what about the beach vacation or the stability or your 401k, right? The way that we want an off ramp for ourselves without ever questioning who built the damn highway. And
mm,
one thing that I know both of us care about is actually learning from people who are already building the alternatives, the organizers, workers who've said, no, thank you, I've had enough. Communities that are creating real solidarity instead of corporate ERGs that honestly, I feel like exist to make you feel heard without changing anything at all. What this podcast isn't is lean in with better lighting. We are trying to, I think, fundamentally reimagine what work could be in a world that isn't trying to extract every last drop of our humanity for profit. And one thing that I will say now for our listeners in this first episode is that this conversation isn't just for people that work in corporate America. This conversation matters to everybody working their butts off in nonprofits, in government, in philanthropy, anywhere and everywhere you work. So, I guess, are you ready to jump in?
yeah. Yeah, let's get into the ick of work today. I'm feeling a little nervous, but ready. And we're going to cover a few things on today's episode. First, we're going to dig into the data on today's reality as a white collar worker. And when we say white collar, what we mean is knowledge workers, people with desk jobs, you know who you are. And if you are questioning if you're part of this, you probably are, to Aparna's point. This is a wide set of worker population who needs support, and we need to be honest about what's happening. We're going to also cover some of the major moral challenges in modern work. So, what the data is showing, what we've heard from workers that make us feel like something's off, but we can't quite understand it. And then lastly, we're going to go a little bit more personal and talk about the way that modern work is impacting our health, our well being, our relationships. And I just want to say that this episode may feel a little hard to hear
Mm.
because we are going into naming truly the reality of these working conditions. And our hope and why we're starting here is that you can come through this feeling less alone and actually interested in helping to change these working conditions as opposed to just making it through it by yourself. And so we know and why we're here is that if we name it, we can change it. So we can get into the story.
Oof, name it to change it. This is gonna be a data heavy episode, just as a warning to folks. And I think for anybody that already knows me, they also know that I am so obsessed with data. And I feel like we're in this moment where naming facts has become political. And so I think like this episode in some ways is also very political. We are going to do a state of the state of knowledge work and workers, how we are thinking and feeling about where and how work happens. So I want to start with a story. It's not mine, even though I have a gazillion stories. And so, Lars, you know that I write for Forbes, and last year I chatted with so many people who had been laid off. And I want to start with Patricia. So Patricia is our age. You know, she's an older millennial working as a marketing director in Austin, Texas. She spent like almost 2 decades building her career and the kind of career that she feels really proud of, right? That she wants to show off. And about a year ago, in January of 2025, she got laid off. And over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, she ends up sending out 150 applications. And it's no small deal to be sending out 150 applications when you're applying for leadership roles, and only ends up getting two interviews, just two.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, well, you experienced this too when you went on your sabbatical last year. The it's just rough out there right now.
Yeah. And the thing that she said that has really stayed with me is she said, I never thought this would happen to me. I used to
Mm.
feel like I was in control of my career, and now I'm constantly refreshing LinkedIn, hoping for a warm lead. And when I read that, I felt nauseous. I felt physically ill because that story is not unique to Patricia. That story is the story of an entire class of workers right now. And I heard the same thing from hundreds of people in my DMs. And that just is a small subsection of folks that are experiencing this, right? This is just the people that reached out to me while I was researching a story. And you're right, like this is also my story when I came back from my sabbatical a year ago. Yeah, the job market felt incredibly challenging.
Yeah. So what's actually happening? The market feels so spooky right now. Something has shifted.
A lot has shifted in the last couple of years. And so this is what the data says. It says that 1 in 4 American workers who lost their jobs in 2024, so this is about a year and a half ago, worked in professional and business services. And those are white collar jobs, the accountants, the consultants, the marketing directors, the project managers, people like you and I. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics that, tracks all of the comings and goings of workers reported that almost a quarter million white collar jobs were cut between May of 24 and early 25. This is right before Trump becomes the president, and they saw a 17-month continuous decline in jobs, unlike anything that has been seen outside of a recession, right? And the last recession was in 2008, 2009, right? So it's been a while since we've seen these trends. And of course, I think like we already know that a little over a quarter million federal workers lost their jobs in the past year, right? 277,000 to be exact. We also know, and this made the news last year, that by June of last year, so in the first 6 months of last year, Black women specifically had lost 300,000 jobs. We also know that at least 40% of all DEI roles that were created between 2020 and 22 were eliminated, and that the tech industry has also shed about a quarter million jobs just in the last 2 years. And I live in Seattle, where a lot of that job loss is happening, right? Amazon just announced 16,000 jobs that it laid off for a total of something like 30,000 jobs in the last couple of months, right? And these tech CEOs are talking openly about doing a reduction in force, a RIF every year or two, at double-digit percentages of their workforce that they want to eliminate. The thing in doing the research for this episode that really stood out to me and it just kind of gutted me is that 25% of all unemployed folks right now are actually white collar workers, and specifically people with a 4-year degree, right? Like these are people that have gone to
Yeah.
college and have work experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to your story about Patricia, where there is this implicit promise of security. You have the degree, you have the title, you're hustling, and I imagine too that this is impacting people who have jobs right now. Like, that sense of security of keeping your job is wobbly as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just the layoffs, but look, the layoffs are real, they're really significant. But even if you still have a job, something feels really off in this moment. And
Mm.
um, one of the things that I found is that Gallup, who has been tracking employee engagement for decades, actually says that employee engagement in the US is at its lowest in 10 years. I think the other thing
Mm,
that we're starting to see, which is really scary, is that the 996 work trends from India and China are coming to the US and also to Western Europe. So that's working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And in my early 30s, when I lived in India and worked in India, I worked that kind of a schedule. Like we worked every Saturday in the office. And I can tell you that it wasn't great for anybody's mental health, even in an ecosystem where there was a lot of help, right? Like all of us had somebody to help us clean our homes and cook our meals. And even with that help, the 996 schedule was really hard. That doesn't exist. That level of support does not exist in the United States. And we're not going to dig into all of the other challenges that come from the exploitation that allows people in places like India and China to work 996. We'll put that off a little bit. The other thing that I found is that 31% of workers feel engaged. So that's 1 in 3. Only 1 in 3 people feels engaged at work, and almost 1 in 5 people are actually actively disengaged, right? And what does that
mm,
actually mean, actively disengaged? It's
mm.
not that they're it's not only that they're checked out, it's that they're checked out and potentially undermining their workplaces, they're potentially undermining their colleagues. These are the people that feel unseen, unheard, and really deeply undervalued. And the
Mm.
factor in the surveys that saw the steepest decline was the response to this question, which is whether anybody at work cares about them as a person and whether anybody encourages their growth. So few people could say yes to that.
That is so hard. It's truly a fundamental part of being a human being is having people actively care about you, invest in your growth, and not having that is yeah, that hurts.
It's got to be so hard, right? Like, can you imagine? I I don't know that I've ever worked in a place where I couldn't say people don't care about me, right? Like I feel like we've worked in really hard places, but to be able to say no, nobody encourages my growth. No, like nobody cares about me as a person. That is just like it's really like it guts me. And who
Mm.
it's hitting the hardest is our youngest workers, right? Gen Z, who, and I
Mm.
know that like as millennials, we love to make fun of Gen Z and all of the ways in which we think they're incompetent.
Well, they love to make fun of us, so it's a beautiful dance.
They do love to make fun of us, but they also feel like nobody at work cares about them. And these are people that
Yeah.
are entering the workforce and immediately, right? Like it's like going to a party and wanting to turn around and leave, right? Because you feel invisible. And this generation like really feels disposable. They feel like a resource and not a human being. And then on top of all of that, like you add the return to office wars and the absurdity just multiplies.
Yeah, yeah, this part has been so confusing for me. I know that it just comes down to money and taxes, but going through COVID, we literally redefined what productivity would be. We stretched the bounds between work and life within the specific demographic of worker. And not to say that that should have happened, but like it gives them actually more room to exploit us. And in
Yeah,
reality, they wanted to grip it tighter. And it's just what a mess. What a mess.
it is a mess. And it's not just the big players that are mandating the return to office, right? Governments are doing that as well. And like, totally, if you work at the DMV, you do need to be in person to issue those driver's licenses. But there are a lot of white collar roles that don't require office work, right? We're also seeing it in philanthropy. Um,
Mm.
One example that really stood out to me is it is a corporate example. It's JP Morgan Chase. They announce a return to office policy, and their employees flood their Slack channel with criticisms of this policy. And what the leadership does is it shuts down all of the comments. It just turns off the comment section of the announcement.
LOL. Yeah, you know, censorship, it's the ultimate peacemaker. That's how you do it.
Well, as a South Asian eldest daughter, yes, this is I know this really well. Just silence is the ultimate peacemaker. But
Oof.
here's the kicker, and I just wonder, like, is the irony lost on these people, right, that are running these organizations? So JP Morgan announces its return to office mandate, and in the period right preceding that, it also reports record profits, $58.5 billion, an 18% increase from the year prior, all while they're operating on this sort of hybrid slash primarily remote model. So the hybrid model is working by their own numbers, right? And when workers push back and ask, the honest answer isn't productivity, even though that is what they're saying publicly. It is control. And 8 out of 10 companies have admitted, right, when they get surveyed, they have admitted that they lose talent as a direct result of the RTO, the return to office mandate,
Mm.
with, and what I find interesting is though there are still some return to office holdouts by way of employees. So about 44% of people say that they would totally comply with a 5-day in office mandate. I have to say, my husband is one of them. He loves going into the office. Um, but 41% say they would immediately start looking for another job, right? So that is like the attrition risk. And another 14% say they would just quit their jobs, right? So now you have more than half of the workforce saying, this is not working for me. And I want to name what's underneath this, push and pull, because I think it connects directly to what our podcast is ultimately about. It isn't about just bad management. And this isn't just kind of this like bumpy post pandemic adjustment period. This is companies telling us, and like, by the way, companies are people, right? This is leaders in companies telling us, we don't trust you. We want to own your time, and your life needs to be organized around our needs, not yours. And by the way, if you don't like it, here's the door. And so many of us, because we are scared, because the job market is so tight, and because 25% of the folks that are unemployed right now have 4-year degrees, so many of us stay. We comply, we smile in the all hand meetings, and we say things like, oh, yeah, we're super excited about the new direction, right?
We're so excited about the strategic refresh for sure.
The strategic refreshes are the best.
They're the best.
It's like opening a can of LaCroix, like
We
so
love
bubbly. We
reorgs.
love them.
So bubbly, so free.
Gosh. Man, I think I'm just re-traumatizing myself thinking about managing the strategic refreshes. But I do
Oh my
feel
gosh.
like that word, I mean, when I hear that word, something inside me just dies a little bit. It really does.
That's an ick. It's an ick. And I think, you know, for people going through this and trying to process how do you fit in this system, it's not a bad attitude, it's not weakness, it's just literally your humanity that isn't feeling it. Um, we invited coworkers and listeners and future listeners to share a little bit with us about what their icks are, what their hopes are for corporate work. And as I said at the beginning, our goal of this is to create a shared experience, to create a community together. And so I want to read one submission before we keep going and just see if anyone relates to this ick. So this person says corporate hierarchies, the fear based ones, immediate ick, Whenever I see a team afraid of leadership, I genuinely cannot compute it. A few years ago, I joined a company, and within my first week, multiple people told me that the entire team was scared of the CMO, like scared. That is wild to me. So I did what felt obvious. I scheduled time with them. I got to know them as a person. I asked questions. I listened. I removed the mythology. And shocker, they were just a human being. I think so much of corporate dysfunction is built on inherited bias and story. They're intense, they're scary, don't say the wrong thing. People start performing fear instead of doing good work. Fear does not produce innovation, it produces compliance and burnout.
Woof.
Mic drop.
It produces compliance and burnout. Oof.
What are we doing?
What are we doing? Okay, so we have been talking about sort of what's been happening to workers. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what companies are doing out in the world while we're sitting in our freaking performance reviews.
Yeah.
So I want to go back a couple of years, and I realize I'm saying a couple of years, but I want to go back to 2021, which is 5 years ago now. Um, we've talked about this a little bit already. The pandemic has done something really strange and unexpected. Millions of us have discovered that we can actually do our jobs from home or from wherever. We are actually more productive. Carbon emissions are down. People are eating lunch with their kids, with their spouse. In my case, I was eating my lunch with my neighbor very regularly. Lots of us saved a lot of money for the first time since the Great Recession because we weren't throwing down $20 on slot bowls from Kava or Evergreens or what have you. And
Mm.
look, I don't want to glorify the pandemic years because there was a lot of hardship, but the bit about remote work working for white collar workers was a powerful yes. And guess what? It also helped people with disabilities and chronic illnesses who we should have listened to in the first place and made remote work possible. And yet, somewhere in a boardroom, a lot of very powerful men looked at all of this, and what they saw was not a healthier society or a more human workforce. What they saw was less control, and they genuinely did not like it.
I wonder why they needed so much control.
Oof. Maybe a different, on a different episode, we dig into the psychology of white men's need for control. But I want to keep going with my story. So this is 2021. I'm deep in one of my most demanding kind of client engagements. It's a big organization, lots of complicated politics, and they want to see yet another round of revisions on a board deck. Version 43. The deck was on version 43. We eventually get to having 67 versions of this, 2 months of my life, and this gets presented at a board meeting. Can you guess for how long?
Ugh, how long?
A whopping 12 minutes. 12 minutes. 12 minutes to talk about employee engagement, well being, what people think about working in this place, how it makes them feel.
I
And the fact that 6 out of 10 of their employees are looking for other jobs.
Oh, wow.
12 minutes. And that moment has really stayed with me. The irreverence of the bosses, my own sort of quiet humiliation over having done 67 versions of a PowerPoint that consumed my life only to be seen for 12 minutes by people with the power to actually change something.
Yeah. The performance of it all is so maddening.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are people that are listening right now that are sort of nodding along, right? Because these anecdotes are not isolated. They are a symptom of something so much larger. So, in my journey of trying to make sense of what I was feeling, I found a scholar named David Graeber, an
Mm.
anthropologist who wrote a book called Bullshit Jobs.
Yes, get into it. Also, rest in peace, David.
Yes, David. We wish you had lived longer and written more amazing books. So, David Graeber makes this argument that corporations have done something totally sinister to our society. They have convinced us that being busy is morally virtuous. I also think that the Catholic Church, Indian parents, other world religions, patriarchy have also helped. We're now in this moment, and we have been in this moment where productivity is a measure of our worth, that a full calendar and overflowing inboxes are achievements. And like, I'm sure, like, you have worked with people that are so proud of how tired they are, right? Like,
Oh,
the
yeah.
people that are like, I have 10,000 unread messages. Which is wild. Why do you have 10,000? Why do you have that many messages? Who is messaging you? And instead of letting productivity gains reduce the hours we work, instead of letting technology give us time to do our life, right? Like the lunches with our neighbors, civic engagement, just like taking a nap, we kept inventing new roles, new meetings, new decks, new versions of old decks. And David Graeber says that pointless work is profoundly demoralizing. People in those jobs often report feeling so ashamed, hiding how little they do or how little value their work adds to the world, experiencing depression, and resenting the fact that their work doesn't contribute anything real to the world. And I feel like I can really attest to that, like 67 versions of that deck. And I remember billing the client $27,000 for that work and
Wow.
feeling so guilty and
Mm.
so sad. Like, surely that money could have gone somewhere more useful, maybe pay raises for the 70% of their workforce that was earning less than a living wage. And
Oof.
like I remember this number also because $27,000 was also my first annual salary as a public school teacher in
Wow.
2006.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, and so Graeber's point is pay is not tied to social value. It's tied to power. And we've gotten scrambled in the desire for the social value to be there with our pay, with our busyness. And of course, the people who are doing the most essential work, our teachers, sanitation workers, nurses, are often the most underpaid. And the people who are doing the most socially useless work are often the highest paid and the highest
That's
status.
also us.
Complete yeah, here we are. We're doing it. And we've built an entire economy on that inversion. And the corporations that benefit from that inversion are impacting the world outside of our office walls, which I want to make sure we get into together because that's part of this dance too is we are creating this hyper social value on this performance of goodness, worthiness while the rest of the world is being impacted around us.
Absolutely. And so this is what I want to get into because you alluded to this in the
Yeah.
trailer, right? Which is that while our employers are running us ragged on version 87 of a PowerPoint, they're doing things out in the world that we as employees are often being asked to quietly enable or ignore completely. Do you want to get into
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I do, and there's so many different angles that we can talk about here, and we will throughout the podcast. This is about opening ourselves up to really recognizing what's happening in the world. But just a couple live happening right now examples of where we're expected to be silent and what happens when we aren't silent. In 2021, Google and Amazon signed this $1.2 billion contract, billion dollars with the Israeli government known as Project Nimbus. And that provides cloud computing, AI, and other technology services to the government and, of course, its military, the IDF. And these technologies enable the Israeli military to conduct mass surveillance on Palestinians and target with ease because of this technology. One of the Google workers said that the object recognition is very useful for targeting, and it allows AI systems to essentially comb through collective surveillance feeds in a way that a human cannot to find specific people. And of course, naturally, when employees found out the extent of what this contract enabled, they did something that a lot of people and corporations don't do. They organized, they signed letters. And I want to give a huge shout out to No Tech for Apartheid. We will link to them in the show notes so you can follow their work. They staged a 10-hour sit-in in Google's offices in New York and California. In April 2024, Google fired 50 employees for protesting Project Nimbus. 9 were arrested. Those employees have over $100,000 in legal fees now, which community members, other people in corporate are helping to fundraise. We can also put that link in the show notes. If you're someone who doesn't know what to do and wants to help, this is a really, really great place to do it. And there's even an example of an engineer who, before he was terminated, he said, I refuse to build technology that powers genocide, apartheid, or surveillance. 3 days later, he was fired.
I remember seeing all of this go down, and I also remember seeing Google's response, which was essentially, this is a workplace. This is not a place for you to live out your values, or, I mean, frankly, any values connected to human dignity, right? Like, this is your work. We expect you to come in and do it. And just,
Yeah.
yeah. And I like so applaud the workers that saw what was happening and started talking about it. And it's so wild to me that the response is, we'll fire you and we will weigh you down with legal fees.
There's endless examples of this. And these stories are really, really important. And I can't promise more than anything else in this show, at least from my vantage point, that we bring these stories out, we name people, we support them because of the great, great risks that folks are taking. And if you look at this example, the contract itself is absolutely terrible. And I've been continually educated by No Tech for Apartheid on this. Leaked documents revealed that the contract specifically prohibits Google and Amazon from restricting how Israel uses their products. So even if there are use violations on their own terms and services, breaking that contract would trigger legal action and heavy financial penalties. So it's a really weird play because they sign away their own ethical authority for the contract, and of course, expect workers to try to just figure that out or be okay with it. In fact, one of the workers found that, they actually amended their AI principles specifically for this contract. Over 70,000 Palestinians have died since October 2021.
Whoa, that I guess I'm sitting with the heaviness, but I'm also, at the time that we're recording this, the Department of War, led by Pete Hegseth, is, trying to pull Anthropic, like push on Anthropic as well in this moment, right? And so we're seeing this happen in so many places, specifically with tech companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just Google and Amazon, there's a huge list. Palantir secured a $30 million contract with ICE to develop a system designed to streamline the mass deportations that we're seeing now. If you go to the federal, spending database right
As
now,
one does.
you'll as one
As one
does,
does, one just casually goes there.
hop on over there. You'll find a list of Fortune 500 companies, names we all know that have active contracts with ICE in 2025, supplying software, hardware, just services to the agency. And I was catching up on No Tech for the Apartheid, just in prep for this episode, and found that as of last week, they have 1,300 Google workers who signed a petition opposing their contracts and partnership with ICE, DHS, CBP. So, under this backdrop, organizing is happening. And again, follow No Tech for Apartheid to stay connected. But
Can
yeah,
I just say how much more powerful it would be? Like kudos, first of all, kudos to the 1,300 Google employees that have put their name down on this, knowing they very well could be fired. And that would be the least
yeah,
worst thing that happened to them. But how much more powerful would it be if the majority of workers at Google, right? Like if 20,000 workers put their names to it, because guess what? Like you can't fire 20,000 people.
right.
1,000 you can single out and fire, but 20,000, right? Like now the stakes change.
Absolutely. And again, that's what we're trying to do here is give us and enough information and create momentum where we can make movements that big, and we need that right now. And of course, this is under the backdrop of like the mission statements that these companies are pitching at us of innovation or making the world better. And when we ask for who, it gets real really fast.
Yeah. Oof. I wonder how many of the people sitting in those all hand meetings or the people working on the 97th version of a deck have any idea of what is
Yeah.
happening. And I think that is the moral dilemma that we're speaking to and that I want us to sit with for a second. Because what I do think is true is that most white collar workers are not choosing to be complicit. I think most of us are so deep in the machine. We are so focused on the next deliverable, the next review cycle, the OKRs, that we've been structurally prevented from seeing the full picture.
Yeah. And Graeber would say this is just by design. When people are exhausted and when your identity is wrapped up in your productivity, you literally don't have the bandwidth to say, what is this company actually doing to the world?
Okay, but some people are asking.
Yeah, yeah, and they should. But unfortunately, when they raise their hand and they say, oh, should we be doing this? Oftentimes they're doing it alone. And in that isolation, they're removed in some capacity. You get fired, admin lead, comment section shut down, and usually under the backdrop of some policy violation.
Whew.
S- So it is not cultural misalignment. It is not poor communication. It is a system that is protecting itself. And I think the thing that I've struggled with in this 15-year career and why I'm sitting here and talking to you, Aparna, is because we are the ones who are running it. We
Mhm.
are the ones who are clicking the buttons. That responsibility is here. And those conditions are really hard because, as we're talking about, we're extremely disempowered in being in these environments. Some people are empowered, some people are having a good time. And we are the ones clicking the buttons. Our neighbors are clicking the buttons. So what do we do about it?
I think we just have to order a case of yacht water. That I think that
Yes.
that is the solution. The yacht water
Yes.
is gonna solve our problems, but just kidding, right? I think the question you and I have been asking ourselves for a very long time, and the question that we're gonna keep asking on this podcast is, what do we do with this information? Because we know
Yeah.
that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you start to understand the system, you can't pretend that things aren't happening that are actually happening. And that's where I want us to go to next in the last couple of minutes of today's episode. We know that our nervous system has been tracking all of this, even as our brain has tried to keep us out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's recap a little bit. We've talked about the state of work today. We talked about the impact that companies have had on the world. So we're working with these two angles. And of course, there's a lot more here to talk about. And where we want to end up is actually getting into understanding how the system is impacting our bodies, literally our physical bodies. Like everything we talked about in today's episode probably isn't new for us, and we can play a little bit more here. So if you are able, take a breath.
Hmm.
Imagine yourself the day before returning to work. Maybe it's a Sunday, whatever that day is for you. Maybe it's, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever. What do you feel like? What's going on in your body? And you might say, I don't know, which is actually really interesting in itself. I spent a long time not knowing. And it's a good question to ask of why don't I know? And for many people, you also know. Maybe you're tightening, there's resistance. And what's happening is your nervous system is preparing itself for that transition, a shift in being. And that wisdom carries automatically into your body at work. So going into work, maybe there's some squeezing. Maybe there's a specific way that your body is taking care of you that we're not even conscious of. It's a learned experience from your environment. And that signal is communicating something. And when we ignore it, it can have a literal cost on our body's health.
Mm. So many, many years ago, I started noticing that I would leave bruises right on this sort of part of my hand, like between my thumb and my index
Yeah.
finger, because I would be sitting kind of like this, kind of clutching, and I would leave these bruises. And I knew that I'd had a particularly stressful week when that bruise was, pretty dark, right? Because I had just been pushing really hard. And I feel like this is the moment where, yeah, our bodies are so far ahead of us. And I know you know a lot of the research about it, right? But there are days where I'm like, this feels dramatic. Like me complaining
Mhm.
about a bruise or, like grinding my teeth, like this just feels so dramatic. Like, why am I being so dramatic? I could just drink a glass of water.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Get on that wellness app. You're not being dramatic. It's literally your nervous system that's trying to communicate to you. And we all have these stories. I have so many, and I have really hard experiences from overriding my body. And that's literally why I became a somatic coach is I saw what was happening to my coworkers when they weren't listening to their bodies. They would get sick. They were not able to you know, s navigate the overwhelm that they're experiencing. They weren't able to act from a place of kindness. We're working with this very limited intelligence that was some kind of survival self that we weren't conscious of, and we're just kinda bouncing off of each other. And, of course, we've been trained by our workplace and our culture to override it, to push through, to stay positive, to be resilient.
I hate that word. I just as an immigrant, as a brown woman, as an elder millennial in perimenopause, I just really hate that word.
Yeah, yeah, and what I mean, we could spend a lot of time on that word, and really what we're talking about is tolerance at the end of the day, which all humans do have to navigate different degrees with their labor, and what we're trying to ask is, what is the cost? What's the line for our bodies?
Okay, so we're gonna have to do a longer episode just on this piece of like what work is doing to our bodies. But I think I want to spend maybe just a few minutes naming a few things. One is that research shows that teaching people to be more resilient in a toxic environment is not the same thing as fixing the toxic environment, right? And what we need to be doing is reducing harm versus resilience washing. And resilience washing is, like the trainings, the yoga subscriptions, or giving everybody the Calm app. It's the unlimited PTO that nobody takes, the mental health days that you spend actually anxious about the work that's piling up, right? Like you can't even relax. And We know that these are not the solutions. They are a pressure valve, and a pressure valve is only useful if somebody is turning down the heat. And in this moment,
Mhm.
nobody seems to be turning down the heat.
Yeah, and again, what does the heat actually cost us? And not in abstract, but real measurable terms. Uh, Researchers at Stanford Business School estimated that more than 120,000 deaths per year in the United States are associated with how companies manage their workforce.
So work is just killing us.
120,000. And that toxic work environments are linked to somewhere between 5 to 8% of all annual healthcare costs, which is a pretty massive cost.
Mhm.
And McKinsey Health Institute found that toxic workplace behavior, so not the absence of good things, but active presence of harmful ones, was the single largest predictor of negative employee outcomes. That's more than twice the global variance of all positive practices combined. So, that yacht water,
No, it doesn't offset what a bad
she's
manager
she's
does.
she's not going to do it. No, unfortunately not. And employees in toxic work environments are 35 to 55% more likely to have major disease. That's heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and all like, in my experience too, we have a tendency to cover that up as stress
Mhm.
of like, "I'm just overwhelmed at work." I've had people tell stories about having serious things going on with their body, and they'll just cover it up. They'll cover it up with makeup, whatever, and just show up to work
Yeah.
when we're actually in real diagnosis that needs our attention. Um, and I know this is something that you think about a lot too, is not just what's happening to our bodies from work, but what's happening in our relationships, what's happening at home outside of these conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, like you, I mean, almost everybody I know, especially the women in my life, are struggling with autoimmune disorders, gut health
Yeah.
issues, right? Like, we've had so many friends that have struggled to conceive all because of the stress that they experience at work. And so that's one piece of it, right? And there's so much shame and stigma about naming what's happening. I also think that there's kind of an invisible problem, which is what happens when parents come home depleted and how they are or are not able to show up for kids. And so, in childhood education, there's we all learn about ACEs, which stands for adverse childhood experiences. And decades long research that basically says that the strongest predictor of lifelong health problem is actually the stress and trauma children experience right earlier in their
Mm.
life. And so yeah, I mean, when parents come home depleted, they have less capacity for warmth, for play, for being present. And they might also engage in harmful behaviors that they don't want to. Like, they don't want to yell at their kids, but they're coming home and they're really exhausted. And ACEs now are being called the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today.
Wow. That's really sad.
Yeah. Um, and then I think here's the part that ties it sort of all together, right? Which is that when people are this worn down, this economically precarious, this disconnected from each other and from any sense of collective power, something else happens. And that's the moment that we're in, which is decades of Americans reporting that they don't feel happy, and the rise in authoritarianism, in political polarization, in the resentment that so many of us experience because, hey, like, CEO pay is up 1,000% since 1978. And the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, still stuck at $7 and I think 25 cents for the last 20 years, right? Like, this is affecting all of us, not just our bank accounts, not just our careers, our health, our kids and our democracy.
Yeah, it's one big ick.
Yeah.
And it's not us figuring it out well enough or our performance or mismanaging our health. That's a conversation I've heard a lot in coaching people who have gotten chronic health issues from their work environment and felt like there's something that they have done. It's measured, compounded harm that starts at your desk and it ripples out across our lives. And this is a shared worker experience as well. You know, we've learned so many lessons from blue collar workers who have fought to make sure that these conditions in the best of their ability can be taken care of. And this is for us to do for ourselves as well. Your body literally knows before you have the language for it.
Mhm.
And that's what this podcast is here for. We want to help build that language. As I said, if you name it, if we know what it is, how it works, where it lives in your body, we can start to figure it out together for real. Which is actually what we're going to do this entire season together.
Okay, but we're also going to have fun. And I feel like this
Yeah.
sort of like level setting first episode that's been data heavy, that's not going to be every single episode. You know, there's a lot of joy in this world. There's grass to touch, there's ways to listen to, there's decks to make.
The beautiful deck will always exist. And yeah, I mean, this episode has been full of a lot of information that, yeah, might have hit different ways. And that's intentional too. Maybe you felt surprised, nothing new, maybe it hurts. And before we wrap up with some offers for us, just notice how you feel right now. Literally, the first step of listening to yourself is just what's going on, what's here. You don't have to do anything, just recognize the feeling, and we'll keep building it from here together.
Okay, so we want to close out every episode the same way with one takeaway from each of us. And one thing that you can actually do this week, no, it's not going to be a vision board or a 5-step framework. It'll just be one small, doable human thing. So, Lars, you want to go first?
I'll go first, and you all probably know exactly what I'm going to say because I keep saying it. Practice listening to your body because your body already knows. It's incredible how much information is there. I've spent my life pushing through. I know what it feels like to ignore myself. And I also know how simple and creative listening is. And yeah, you'll just be surprised how much intelligence is there waiting for you. So the ask is for this week while you're in a meeting, ask yourself, how does my body feel right now? Maybe you notice your posture, maybe you're squeezing a pen. I used to break pens all the time, and I thought it was a regular thing to
I
do.
used to break
And
pencils. Yeah.
I told it to a coworker, and they looked at me like, "Bro, that's not okay." I had no idea. I just thought we all were breaking pens because what else are you going to do with this energy? The point is, whatever you're doing, feel it and just track your internal language. Your body is your earliest and most honest ally, and that even includes when we're triggered. Just track and see what happens.
Oh, okay. Well, how do I follow this? So my takeaway is that, you know, we've been taught very deliberately to not air our dirty laundry
Ah,
and, right, to be alone in figuring all of this out. So don't treat your suffering at work as a private problem or a personal failing. Talk to other people about what's happening. None of us can think our way out of this on our own. We need each other and we need to tell each other what we're thinking and what we're feeling. And that, honestly, today is the most strategic thing I can offer you.
I love it. And hey, here's another small thing. Eat lunch with someone this week. Not a working lunch, not lunch at your desk with your headphones on, just a good old fashioned lunch with another person where you ask them something real. And one of the most important questions that we can ask people is, what do you care about? Literally just ask, what do you care about? And maybe you want to write out the theme of this episode. What's giving you the ick right now? What are you tired of pretending is fine? You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to have answers. Just be with each other. And if you're curious, you might also start to think about the way you could help them in that care. But we'll get there. First, just connect. Every single movement in history has started not with a manifesto, but literally a conversation of what we care about together.
And if you don't have somebody at work you feel safe enough to do that with, to eat lunch with, maybe sit with that because that's exactly the kind of thing we're going to be unpacking in this season.
Yeah, we got you. Which, speaking of this season, our next episode is going to be a little white collar business history story time led by yours truly. We're going to trace how white collar work became what it is today. Big moment in the 1970s, the rise of the consumer economy, yacht water all day, the birth of more and more and more. And that origin story for us is when you see it, then you can remember that it wasn't always this way and that we can change it. So let's get rooted in our specific worker history together. So,
Okay.
the LaCroix will start to make sense.
Oof. I love where we're going. And so, if today resonated with you, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with one more person, not for the numbers, but because there's somebody probably sitting at their desk right now feeling exactly what you felt at the beginning of this episode, and they don't yet have the language for it. So, give them the language. And also, we want to hear from you. We want to know your stories about your icks, but also your hopes for work. We're going to weave them throughout our show in hopes of building a community where you know you are not alone. And so, if you have a story about work you want to share with us, send us an email or an audio recording to hello@circleback.club. We will see you next week. This is the Circle Back Club.
Cue the jazz.